I finally found you! I was just wondering, what's your story? I just have a few questions. Guess I'm gonna have to find out myself.
Crash Bandicoot is a game series we all should know and love from childhood. It is the epitome of simple fun. You know, the old school type of fun where you jump onto enemies to kill them and you perform spin attacks, spin attacks, spin attacks, spin attacks, spin attacks! The player guides Crash from the beginning of each level to the end, navigating through treacherous environments and hostile creatures. And while I remember the fun of Crash, I don't quite remember anything about the story. I got to thinking, hey, does the Crash Bandicoot series have a legitimate chronological plotline? And since Crash didn't want to tell me his story arc when I found him chilling on the beach, I thought I'd get back on the old saddle and relive my Orange Bandicoot fruit feast in childhood with one objective in mind, to find out the actual storyline. Now, remember, this will be a very basic overview of each game, not a deep dive into the lore. I'm not going to tell you about the exact height and weight of each power crystal, or the ethically questionable logistics of turning woodland creatures into mutant soldiers. I just needed an excuse to play these games again, okay? While there are a lot of Crash Bandicoot games to date, I think to get a general idea of a storyline and for the sake of time, I'm going to only talk about these games from the main series. The OG Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, Crash Bandicoot Warped, the PS2 era, which is the Wrath of Cortex and Twinsanity, and finally, the more modern Crash 4, It's About Time. Is there a deeper thread connecting these wacky adventures, or is Crash just smashing crates with no rhyme or reason? Let's break it down game by game and see what Crash's story is really all about. The OG Crash Bandicoot. In the first installment of Crash Bandicoot, we're introduced to Neo Cortex, the main villain, and his sidekick, Entropy. He pretty much stays the antagonist through all the games. His master plan in this game is to create an army of mutant animals using his Evolvo Ray. Think Mad Scientist meets Animal Planet. And when Cortex tries to zap Crash into the Ultimate Soldier, the ray gun glitches and Crash escapes Cortex's lab. The only problem is, Crash left behind his girlfriend, Tawna. Yep, Crash has a girlfriend, and she's being held by Cortex. So naturally, our orange hero decides to rescue her by, running, jumping, spinning, and smashing everything in sight. The game is basically one giant rescue mission with an occasional fight against minions who, honestly, seem just as confused as Crash. You've got Ripperoo, who's a literal insane kangaroo, and Papu, who's just mad you're in his house. And then, of course, there's Cortex himself, waiting on his airship for the ultimate showdown. When you defeat him, he falls off his airship and Crash gets his girl back, and then they ride away into the sunset on this bird. It's a simple story, but honestly, it's iconic. Crash doesn't talk, Cortex has a giant head, and the whole game feels like a fever dream, and yet it works. Who knew a spinning Bandicoot could become a legend? Crash Bandicoot, Cortex Strikes Back. Crash 2 picks up with Cortex literally crashing down to Earth after the first game. Does he take a break? Maybe rethink his life choices? Nope. He immediately gets back to being evil. This time, Cortex decides he's going to collect these shiny power crystals to power a doomsday device to enslave the minds of the world. And here's the twist, he tricks Crash into doing all the work for him. Basically, Cortex shows up like, "Hey Crash buddy, wanna save the world? Just grab some crystals for me, no biggie." And Crash, bless his sweet simple heart, just goes, Meanwhile, Aku, the floating voodoo spirit who acts as a guide throughout these games, is probably screaming internally. So Crash runs through the jungles, ice caves, and sewers collecting crystals for the bad guy while he plots behind the scenes. And the whole time, Crash's sister, Coco, is trying to warn him about how much of a dinkus he's being. Along the way, you fight some old friends like Ripperoo, who somehow got his PhD. Yeah, the kangaroo is smarter than me now. And Tiny Tiger, who's, not so tiny. The game ends with Cortex trying to activate his big lasery mind control weapon, but Crash and his sister Coco shut it down, and Cortex ends up tumbling into a cold void of space. It's like karma's on speed dial with this guy. Crash saves the day again, but man, you can't help wondering, how did Cortex convince him to help him in the first place? Maybe Crash just really likes shiny things. Crash Bandicoot Warped. Crash Bandicoot Warped. Now this is where things get wild. We find out Cortex has been working under Uka Uka, an evil floating mask, who's basically Aku Aku's way grumpier twin brother. We find out that since Uka was ensnared into a prison many years ago, he was giving Cortex simple instructions to follow this whole time from his place of entrapment.
I sent you simple instructions to follow.
Now he is free due to the Cortex vortex falling onto his prison. Anyway, he's out and he's scolding Cortex for being bad at being a bad guy. Together, they open a time portal and start stealing crystals from the past and future. Because, you know, if you can't beat Crash in the present, might as well mess up all of history. Warp takes Crash to literally another level. Time travel. Crash and Coco team up to stop them, traveling to ancient Egypt, medieval castles, and even dinosaur-filled wastelands. Oh, and let's not forget riding Coco's tiger across the Great Wall of China. In the end, Crash faces Cortex and Uka Uka in a time-twisting boss fight, and once again, Cortex's plans literally blow up in his face. He and Uka Uka get trapped in a time vortex, probably arguing for eternity. And Crash? He's just vibing, ready for whatever comes next. Honestly, this game is like a Saturday morning cartoon on steroids, and I love it for that. Once again, Cortex underestimates our Bandicoot hero, and history stays safe thanks to Crash. The PlayStation 2 era of Crash brought us the Wrath of Cortex and Twinsanity, and a couple others, but those are the ones we'll be focusing on. Wrath of Cortex introduces us to Crunch, who is basically Cortex saying, okay, Crash is great, but let's add muscles. So Cortex creates Crunch Bandicoot, a brawnier counterpart to Crash in hopes he might finally be the one to defeat Crash. Cortex also unleashes the elementals, these magic masks that control earth, fire, water, and air. It's like Avatar, The Last Airbender, but with way more spinning. So Crash has to stop the elements by collecting gems, traveling through levels full of lava pits, snowstorms, and, you guessed it, more crates. Crunch has a change of heart and joins the good guys, leaving Cortex to sulk in the corner, and he learns absolutely nothing from his latest failure. Shocker! In Twinsanity, the series' first attempt at a more free-roaming type of gameplay, Cortex tries to ambush Crash into the opening scene.
Surprised to see me, Crash? All of your friends are here.
But it backfires so spectacularly that the two end up working together. Yep, Crash and Cortex team up to stop a pair of interdimensional birds called the Evil Twins. It's like a buddy comedy where one buddy wants to destroy the other, but they kind of need each other. This game leans heavily into humor, with Cortex constantly getting smacked around by Crash and complaining about it. At one point, Cortex literally gets used as a snowboard, and yet somehow you start to feel for the guy. He's more of a punching bag than a villain here. Let's spin into Cortex's misery montage.
My crystal! How could things get any worse?
The Evil Twins are a real threat, though. Crash and Cortex have to navigate all sorts of bizarre levels, including Cortex's twisted memories. We find out the birds were actually created from young Cortex's failed experiment. The story ends with the Evil Twins defeated.
Let's get out of here!
Cortex still miserable, and Crash, well, Crash is probably just happy he got to spin a lot. It's a wild ride, and honestly, one of the funniest entries in the series. Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time. There's no move more modern in media than to introduce the multiverse. And why should Crash Bandicoot be an exception? In this latest installment, Cortex and Entropy break out of their prison and try to conquer the multiverse. The game introduces quantum masks, each with unique powers, like phasing objects in and out of existence or flipping gravity. Crash and Coco team up again, hopping in between dimensions to stop Cortex's latest scheme. Eventually, as any evil villain should, Entropy betrays Cortex, so Cortex starts working with Crash and Coco to try and stop Entropy and his female counterpart. Yep, there's two of them now. And they... yeah. They team up to try and conquer the multiverse, which makes things even messier. But Crash and Coco and Cortex and this guy handle it like champs, with plenty of slapstick chaos along the way. After the crew takes care of Mr. and Mrs., it isn't too long before Cortex is back to his evil ways. This time, he plots to go back in time and stop himself from ever creating Crash. Why do developers and storytellers in general think they have to do time travel and multiverse stuff? The story ends with Cortex defeated, again, and he's put into forced retirement on a tropical beach. Except, does anyone actually believe Cortex can stay retired? Yeah, me neither. Crash 4 brought the series back into its roots while adding some fresh twists. Oh, and we find out Crash actually saved himself in Part 1 from being turned into a Bandicoot general in Cortex's army by malfunctioning the Evolvo Ray. So now that we've done a basic summary, we want to answer the big question. Is there a thread of story that weaves a connection through these games? Well, kind of. The games loosely follow the ongoing rivalry between Crash and Cortex, but they're not too concerned with the strict continuity. There is somewhat of a timeline, because the games usually pick up where the last one left off. It's like a sitcom, same characters, different chaos every episode. Cortex comes up with some wild plan, Crash spins his way to victory, and the world goes back to normal. Repeat. It's not Shakespeare, but hey, do we really want it to be? It's all part of the lighthearted fun you feel while playing these games. Funnily enough, if you look closer, Crash's story isn't about saving the world, it's about one Bandicoot who just wants to chill, but Cortex can't leave him alone. Each game feels like a Saturday morning cartoon, connected, but self-contained enough to stand alone. You can hop into any of these games without playing any of the others and understand what's going on. There's a beginning and a conclusion, and in the end, the games don't take themselves too seriously, and neither should we. Crash Bandicoot's story might not win an Oscar for Best Screenplay, but that's part of the charm. It's silly, chaotic, and downright fun. Let me know in the comments what's your favorite Crash game, and do you think the story matters as much as the gameplay for these games? Thank you so much for watching, and hey, if you want me to tackle another nostalgic series or game next, just shout it out below. Stay spinning, my friends, and until next time, crash you later! Wait, whatever happened to Tana, Crash's girlfriend from the first game? She just disappeared after game 1. Like, did Crash forget to send a follow-up text or something? I hope they're okay. Oh wait, this was supposed to be her from Crash Bandicoot 4. Oh, it's like an alternate universe counterpart kind of thing. Gotcha. Now she's rocking a punk look and saving her own day. Good for her, honestly. I wonder what she was up to the whole time since the first game. Okay, bye.